Whatto chaps, I'm Magical Mike, and it's the end of 2023, well actually it's the start of 2024 right now because I'm late on this video, and the end of yet another rather sparse year for videos on the channel. We can absolutely blame Baldur's Gate 3 for the last few months, but sometimes you just have to enjoy the games you're talking about instead of thinking about how to make content with them, you know? I'd like to remind you that I make this kind of review video yearly, and that there's plenty of other videos on the channel that you might not have seen. It's kind of the point of these videos even. So drop a like, consider subscribing, and go check out the stuff I'm about to talk about if you're interested in that stuff. Cheers! Last year I was pretty ambivalent about only putting out 6 videos, but this year it's only slightly bumped up to 7. I do think that there were some proper good ones overall. I'm particularly happy with all 3 Quids In reviews, but yeah, we're a little light on quantity again, and I'm not so bothered about it this time. I think as long as I'm pleased with the overall quality of the videos, then I'll be happy that I'm not just shoving out a load of crap stuff to fill in the gaps. Views are still super low on basically everything, and at this point I'm not sure how to fix that without going full clickbait and drilling down onto the analytics side of things. And that bothers me the most, if I'm honest. I think what sucks the most is that the average YouTube user just isn't even clicking on the videos. They do get shown to people, but the click-through rate is in single digits at this point. I reckon that if given the chance, fans of those particular games that I'm talking about, or people interested in the genres, would actually be interested in watching the videos that I make, but I really don't like having to think about the algorithm and marketing them properly, so I just kind of don't. Obviously this is a self-defeating approach, and I did actually try a little bit of clickbaity stuff this year. I messed with a few title changes and thumbnail edits, and did notice some minor success from it, but I mean seriously minor. Like, maybe I'd get a few new viewers, as in perhaps a dozen more than normal. But with the size of my channel and the amount of views things get normally, these tiny increases were actually enough to make a noticeable impact on the analytics graphs. But the amount of effort involved and the feeling of sheer tackiness and outright cringe in some cases in trying to essentially manipulate people to click on stuff felt seriously demoralising. To the point where I undid those changes and put the titles back to their regular styles. It's safe to say, I simply don't like how you have to go about manipulating the algorithm. The common tricks that work don't feel good to use, so I'm sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place there. Have you noticed, for example, that loads of effort goes into editing the first 30 seconds of a really popular video, with like popping text and cold opens, dramatic sound effects and all of that stuff, and then the rest of the video is just cut together clips like I do. Stuff like that drives me mad when I notice it. A few other simple edits like punching into a character's face at the end of a sentence, or something totally random for comedy, or punching the whole screen out if you aren't totally sure about what's being said. See, I see so many trends all the time, and I just don't want to be part of that chase. I just want to make videos that I think speak for themselves, but presentation is such a massive factor these days, and I find it mostly superfluous, so kind of that rock and hard place thing. I do wonder that if I made an entirely new channel, if it would have that new channel success thing that I see regularly. But again, I'm just being stubborn about that and sticking to this one. Seriously, I find loads of channels that have like 5 videos on them total, and they've somehow blown up on their first ever upload. I think there's something going on behind the scenes there for new channels to encourage them to stick on the platform, but that's speculation, I don't know. I've now taken to writing Steam reviews, and some of those get a little bit of attention, which is nice. I put video links on the end of those too, so it does help a little bit. There's also a Steam curator group for my Quids In review videos, which I should probably link in the description of this video too, if I remember. Neither of these things are really important, but it's fun, and I thought I'd mention them. Oh, and with YouTube changing stuff so often, it's good to know that the one constant thing seems to be the playlists, which I do keep in order all the time, so if you're ever wondering about what I make, then check that tab on the channel. Alright, so let's talk Quids In first, since they bookended this year's videos. In January, I uploaded a review for Dirt Rally 1. Sometimes I like to do things a little bit differently, see the Call of Juarez review, for example, and this time was less of a structured review on the game and more of a short documentary on the history of rally as a sport. The way the game is structured sort of leads you through the same kind of progression that the sport itself has gone through, from the 1960s all the way to the 2010s. Obviously the older cars are slower and usually easier to drive than the newer ones, with some exceptions like Group B stuff in the 80s. So as you go through the years, you get faster cars that are then harder to maximise your times with. Anyway, I wrote all of it as if I were talking about the real thing, but I think you get a decent idea of how the game plays too, with it trying to be a realistic simulation with questionable physics involved. The editing there was actually fun as well. I did go and put some effort in, which is not entirely normal for me. I went with a Top Gear kind of inspired thing with slides and multiple viewpoints of the stages and cars in little windows with black bars between. You know, actual effort. Which, like I said, is pretty rare since usually it's just cut together clips and long shots in most of my videos. Because I really enjoy having longer shots most of the time since you get a better idea of the gameplay that way, just as a side note. One of my biggest values in everything I do on YouTube is letting the games speak for themselves, at least as much as I can, and I find that long shots of the gameplay without any cuts tends to be a big factor in that, and those are also the kind of videos that I enjoy watching when I'm researching whether or not I will enjoy a game in the first place or not. It's hard to get an idea of if you're going to enjoy something if somebody's cutting stuff together every 5 or 6, 10 seconds, because you just don't really feel what it's like to play the game, you just get snippets of things, and yeah, it's not really what I'm interested in. Anyway, give that Dirt Rally video a look though. I often end up using rally footage from those two Dirt games because I find it so smooth to watch, personally. It's probably even in this video right now. In June, I put out the Hollow Knight review. This took a lot, thanks Clicks Philip, of time to make, and the script totally got away from me, but man, that game deserves all the praise it gets. It's like a 30-minute review, which isn't normally what I want to aim for. I prefer shorter content. I feel like everybody these days is making multi-hour long essays on games, and an absolute ton of it feels like nitpicking for padding, and a lot of those videos seem to grab attention purely because of the insane run times. I do like some of those ultra essays, by the way, but I really don't want to be part of the crowd that actually makes them, because it's just not my style, despite this video probably being about 30 minutes too. And the 30-minute Hollow Knight review was a bit on the long side for me. On another aside, I noticed loads of those kind of reviews reuse so many clips all the time, and that kind of bothers me too, but whatever, I'm probably the only person who actually even notices it, because most people aren't even watching the footage in these things these days. Are you, viewer, right now, with this on the second monitor? I see you. I'm just kidding. 20 hours or so to rebeat Hollow Knight it took, and however long it took to put the video together as well. And this was a fun one. I particularly liked adding the music and doing the little captions when the background track changes. Again, something I don't normally bother doing, but I wanted to call attention to it in this video because I love Christopher Larkin's OST. If you ever wonder what kind of music is in a video, by the way, it is always listed in the video descriptions. Probably somewhere near the bottom. Oh, I will say I had way too much footage of me taking damage in the Hollow Knight video that I wasn't really too happy with, but oh well. You will take damage in that game. It's very hard to play it deathless. And in July, I put out the Spyro Reignited Trilogy review. You could technically have split this into 3 videos, one for each game, and I'd have had plenty to talk about for each. But I put them together in one, and even though I just said I don't really want to make longer content, this ended up being about 30 minutes again. But it's 3 games in one, so I think that's pretty fair. I think this might have taken way longer than I expected to make too. I enjoyed playing through Spyro 1 a lot, and then 2 started to drag a little towards the end, and then 3 breathed some fresh air back into the process again, but I found myself starting to want the 100% completion to come to an end much faster than it actually did. This was just a personal problem with playing all 3 games back to back like that for the review. I think overall they're all great fun, as I said in the video, but I burned myself out on them a little bit there. Again, if you actually want to hear my takes on the classic series, the video is there. I was at one point actually going to stream these too, but I never got around to it, and now we've got this review instead, and I probably never will bother streaming the Spyro games. And that was the last video I put out, like 6 months ago. Yikes. But in between, there were 3 recent lean-ins, starting with Total War Warhammer in February. I've never really played a Total War game, but I've seen so much content about them and never really felt very well interested in playing the franchise myself. It's like there's so many historical ones that try to focus on one part of history or particular culture, and I've never been able to pick a favourite to go with the game for. Until Warhammer came about, and after playing Vermintide a ton, I got into the whole fantasy aspect and ended up giving it a go with Total War. Great decision, it absolutely sucked up an entire month at the start of the year, and I did end up loving it. I said in the video that I was going to get right back to playing Bretonia afterwards, but instead I cleaned up all the dwarf achievements that I was going for, and I put the game down for later, and never went back to it. But I probably will still. The lure of that cavalry charge is still there, waiting for me, and it still looks good. even despite all the creative assembly drama that's been happening for the last few months. Probably just not going to bother talking about that. Recently, Need for Speed Heat also came out that same month. This was an out-of-nowhere sale on the game, and it was just like a $5 or something, so I ended up grabbing it and playing the heck out of it. It turns out the Need for Speed franchise has been up and down all over the place, with Heat being more positively received than most, but still not that great, and I'd missed out on all of that conversation for the past, oh god, when was Underground released? Like 2003 or something? Alright, okay, so let's pretend I didn't just see 20 years of my life flash by like that. Let's just move on. Anyway, the game was fun enough in its arcadey approach to the driving. I normally prefer things to be a bit more grippy and much less drifty when it comes to tarmac racing. This was a fun change of pace for me. There was a ton of stuff to do overall, and it kept me busy. It was a very good buy for the price, and I still enjoyed looking at the wraps I had on all of my cars in the video too. And finally, I did not expect to dive so deeply into Diablo 3's Season 28, the second to last season that they ever put out. I only picked it up because Diablo 4 was looking pretty decent at the time and I fancied the nostalgia. Then I ended up getting sucked in for a long while in the summer and basically maxing out the Wizard and Demon Hunter, and at least having working max torment farming builds on every single class in the game. It was fun. I mean, it's Diablo 3, so what's really to say at this point? The game's kind of over and done with now that D4 is out. Mind you, I am incredibly glad that I did not bother buying Diablo 4. Yikes, I think I dodged a bullet there. D4's had this balance and fun problems since release, and it doesn't look like it's getting any better with the rather expensive looking expansion on the horizon. Not great stuff coming from Blizzard in the past. I have no idea how long Blizzard have really kind of fallen off, haven't they? Oh dear. Anyway, D3 at least went out with a bit of a bang for me. It's satisfying to look back at all the set items that I have in my storage now and see all those builds working one last time. I don't think I'm much of an ARPG player. I could never get into Path of Exile, for example, but hey, with this, return to D3, PoE 2 might actually be good to look at eventually. I'll keep an eye on that. The final video to talk about was April's Guild Wars 2 video, Why Gayala Delve Forebodes Future Expansions. And yes, that is a mouthful title, but I didn't just want to call it Gayala Delve is Guild Wars 2's worst update ever for clickbait, even though it arguably is one of the worst content updates ever. I mean, the patch I was talking about was pretty lackluster as a map overall, but the follow-up was an absolute piss take. No exaggeration, it was completely arse. I didn't talk about it, but I mean, it was literally a single tunnel with 3 or 4 walls, which you would just have to spam the turtle against. 1 or 2 I could maybe understand, with some events in between or something like that to keep things interesting, but 3 or 4 of the same static object thing with nothing interesting going on at all? Even the final boss was bad? I mean, holy crap, it's still shockingly bad to look at. Nobody runs that anymore. I mean, literally, you just wast around and hit walls. Walls, for crying out loud. The whole damn map is walls and balls. And then, like I said, the boss at the end that just has you run around in circles and not actually fight the boss. I can't even meme on how bad this update was because I'd have to dissect so much stuff. It's ridiculous. Like, what were they thinking? It's embarrassing, I think, is how I'd sum it up. Gayala is an actual stain on Guild Wars 2. Anyway, then the expansion released, and I think I was spot on with my assessment of it from the expectations that were set in and around that video. I haven't bothered buying Soto, and from what I've seen with it, I don't regret it either. I don't think I've missed out a single thing. Secrets of the Obscure is just more of the same, but in some cases worse or more boring, for a price tag. So yeah, mini expansions are so far looking outright terrible to me. Maybe I should do a proper video on that eventually, but no promises. Man, I am starting to see how all those ultra essayists managed to talk for so long. Again, this year I also played a few things that I haven't done videos on, either because I didn't want to, or because I might do later. It turns out that anytime I'm enjoying a game and start to feel a desire to make a video about it, I end up stalling on that indefinitely if I don't immediately focus up and start on that video. Which means I just sort of stop playing the game and move on to something else, because if I were to keep playing, then I'd miss out on my chance to record those parts that I was currently enjoying. It's rather an annoying part of being a YouTuber, at least in my experience. And like I said, I don't just want to make stuff for the sake of content. I actually want to make videos that I'll enjoy re-watching later on. They act like a sort of diary for me too, and I hope that sort of comes across to all of you guys. So of course, Baldur's Gate 3 came out in August, and that's literally been all I've played ever since, until December. Well, over 300 hours went into a full playthrough as a paladin, an almost full co-op as a druid, and an Act 1 Dark Urge bard playthrough too. And then I found myself hitting a sudden burnout, so I took a break, but the game is incredible. I'd rather not talk about it here because this is an easy candidate for plenty of videos, but man, what an amazing RPG. The explosion of content and build guides has been really interesting to see. Some good, some outright terrible in my opinion. I was watching one series that devolved into a truly boring one with reactions to huge, mind-blowing events such as, wow, and okay, and I just could not deal with that anymore. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm low energy too, but if you're let's playing, then I think you have a duty to explain your thoughts and reactions to certain things going on in the game, otherwise what is the point of even commentating over it in the first place? Like, say stuff, please. And then there was a ton of build videos that don't actually tell you how the character operates until they hit maximum level, or they show how mega super overpowered they are in the Nautiloid tutorial, thanks to using Cheat Engine, which is completely useless stuff. So yeah, Baldur's Gate 3, probably something I do want to talk about at some point, but actually properly, and not like these people did. And since I did just rant a little bit about Guild Wars 2, I was actually playing a ton of it at the start of the year. I had goals, I was focused on getting some legendary weapons, a full set of runes, and some of the Aurene weapon variants. And I did finish a Gen 3 dagger and the axe. I got all 7 runes. Yes, 7, you heard me right, that includes the underwater one, and 4 variants for those weapons. A lot of gold got farmed and dumped into stuff for a while there, but the Guyala Delve stuff wrecked my motivation, and the mini X-Pack stuff just killed any desire to continue. I'm not even going to mention the whole legendary relic fiasco, which has taken my rune functionality and chunked it off to sell it to me. Still kind of upset about that, but whatever. Maybe it's worth a video explaining all of that stuff in detail, but I haven't actually logged in at all since September, so Guild Wars 2 is not looking good for me at the moment. I did pick up Dark Souls 2 to play alongside a friend last December, but I put it down around the same time that he did, with the intention of doing a video on that, the reasons why DS2 is kind of alright but not great in a lot of ways. And then I just didn't pick it back up again. Funnily enough, neither did my mate. I think he maybe felt the same way that I was going to talk about, so yeah, still kind of a black sheep of the Souls series. At some point I wanted a bit of a time waster game just before BG3 came out. I didn't feel like getting too deep into something, so I played Slime Rancher. And what a weird little game that is. It's super chill, it's really easy, there's no stress, and it has a lot of silly noises and everything that everything makes. It made me feel like a kid again, which is kinda nice, actually, to just relax with it and not have to care about optimizing things. I mean, you can, but you really don't need to. And it's quite short too. It's kind of like a farming game with all the progression and unlocks that you have to work through, but without the ultra long-term approach that something like Stardew Valley has. Definitely recommend it. Don't think I'll do a video on it, but I did enjoy it for a week. Again, not really sure. Would be a very easy video to make, but confusing noises. I've also been enjoying a playthrough of Mountain Blade Warband, again, probably footage that you'll see in this video. It's been a good way to break from the style of CRPG that BG3 is, lots of acronyms here. Just roaming around battlefields as a horse archer character while commanding a small army to crush the skulls of my enemies and see them driven before me. Saranid Mamluks are pretty impressive to see galloping across an open field, or desert in this case, and smashing into an infantry line. I had an idea to do one of those story-like videos about how I caused a rebellion and took over the faction, but I wasn't really sure about making it, and at this point I've progressed beyond that point now. Everyone knows that Warband is a great game. Again, another easy candidate to talk about in the future in videos. And finally, I got into Assetto Corsa. I pretty much modded the heck out of it. I added the Shotoko Revival project, a whole bunch of touring car circuits, a ton of cars and 2G tracks, I hope I'm saying that right, and I treated it like a casual driving sim. Just load it up, shove some traffic in, and go blasting around Tokyo at midnight, or like the LA canyons, or some Irish town, or something like that. I'm generally terrible at the game because it's super hard on controller, but it's still real neat to just cruise around in some iconic machines. You'll have been seeing it in the background here for sure. The SRP stuff in particular is impressively made, and I could pick any of their cars and listen to them go boosting for hours at a time. And that stuff's all well and good. I think a big part of these videos, it has to be reflection on the things that have happened over the year, whether you've seen them or whether I've just not bothered doing videos on them. But I do like to try and include some kind of plans for the next year too, or at least some kind of vague ideas or possibilities, so let's be having you. There's so many games that I'd love to talk about, just so many. I've mentioned a few of them already, and I've mentioned a bunch of them previously too, and they just haven't come to fruition yet. The Halo stuff is still TBD, Thief 2014, as if that needs yet another video on the series though. That's a super popular essay topic. These are things that I've mentioned multiple times, and we still have like no indication of whether or not I'm ever going to get round to them. So keep your eyes peeled, I suppose. Baldur's Gate is ripe for discussion, and I think it probably will be forever, because it's just one of those games that is never going to lose its luster. I sort of want to do an honor mode storytime video, but I also don't really want to drag my enjoyment down by focusing on content. I could stream it, but I also think that might be a bit of a low effort thing to do, so I'm not really sure about how I want to go about that, but I do want to do honor mode at some point. We'll see. I think Dark Souls 2 is a pretty easy commitment, so definitely keep your eyes peeled for that, and I think things like Pathfinder Kingmaker are really tough ones to suggest doing. There's a lot of games like Kingmaker, Knights of the Old Republic, the Divinity games, a proper BG3 review, which definitely won't ever happen, I don't think, because I like to approach it more casually. Actually trying to make a proper review of BG3 would be such a massive undertaking that I don't think I'd be able to do it justice well enough, so don't expect that. But those other games that I mentioned, like KOTOR, Divinity, things like that, these games need more time and thought put into them to produce something worthwhile, and I'd like to, but I kinda doubt that I'll be able to do it, so those are like a vague maybe at best. Generation 0 is something that you saw in maybe last year's or the year before's video. I haven't played that in a long time, and it's had so many changes since I did last play it that it might not even be the same game anymore. I don't know, but I did at that point I was playing it want to talk about it, and looking back on it, I still would. It's a good game, or at least it was. I don't know about now, so who knows. Stardew Valley is another one of those big examples of a giant undertaking. Like, you could talk pretty casually about Stardew, but it's a big game, and if you wanted to cover all of it, that's a lot to talk about. That game is massive. And there's a ton of games in my Steam library that are perfect for stream games, but I've been sitting on them for so many years at this point that I may never get around to them. So either I start streaming again, which is not too likely, or I just play stuff on my own, which is definitely more likely. I'll just feel a bit more guilty about doing that because I won't be sharing them. Problem is, I have literally no idea what approach I want to take with those things yet. I don't want to be this low effort streamer, not saying anything and just playing a game in the background while I just happen to be live, but I also don't want to talk to a non-audience. It's this weird catch-22. You don't get an audience unless you're talking to people, but it's also not fun to talk unless you have the people already there, so you see what it's like, right? I've talked about this many times before though, so you know how it goes at this point if you've ever seen one of these videos. Basically, there are now so many damn games that I'd love to talk about, but so little time to actually play them. I want to do another Final Fantasy VIII playthrough, for example, to talk about my absolute love for that game too, but it's a game that I've played like a dozen times at this point, where I should be spending the time instead to play FF9 for the first time. Or should I, actually? Because that's a good question. I really couldn't say, but the backlog at this point is immense, and I don't know if I should feel bad about that, or just more excited about it. I don't know, that's a weird one, now that I think about it. But there's so many things to do, and the curse of tiredness, or laziness, depending on your viewpoint, is very much in full force. The fight continues, I suppose. Cheers for watching this video and all of that. Leave a comment if you want. I do, of course, read them, and I even respond to them. That's crazy how that works, isn't it? Alright, cheers for watching. I'll see you next time.